Welcome to Tabletop Talks number 4. We're going to be having a look at the rules for the Japanese. They're very, very different to the rules for the Western theatre of operations. Japanese play quite differently. We're also going to be looking at the special rules for the Pacific theatre of operations. Again, these are different. Pretty much going to have to be taking as read that people know the basic infantry rules for advanced squad leader, or know them reasonably well, so that enough to be able to follow what's going on here, because we're going to be adding on to that all of these special rules. If you don't know the rules for basic infantry in advanced squad leader, go back to Tabletop Talks number 1 and watch that through. That'll get you up to speed. But also, realistically, you should have played quite a few games in the sort of European theatre of operations before you start trying to bring on board special rules for a theatre like the Pacific theatre. Right, well, without further ado, let's get into the scenario proper. Okay, so we're going to take a quick look at the scenario card for Jungle Island. Now, Jungle Island is, like all of the Tabletop Talk scenarios, is not designed for tournament play. It's not designed to be balanced. It's in the spirit of if you were with a friend face to face and you're going to show them how to play the Pacific, get a couple of counters out, get a random board out, and kind of run them through things. That's exactly the purpose of this. If you wanted to own the scenario cards, they are downloadable. They are downloadable from our Patreon. You would need to become a Patreon. Although a nice little loophole is you wouldn't necessarily need to be a Patreon for very long to download them. So that would be up to you if you wanted to download these nice scenario. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time looking at the scenario card, because obviously by the time people come to the Pacific, they know how to read a scenario card. I suppose the significant things are that we've got two nationalities here who have special rules. The Japanese, and we're going to go through those. There's a lot of special rules relating to the Japanese, and there's a couple of rules about the Australians, which you may well have come across, playing in the European theatre. First thing I thought we'd do is have a quick look at the victory conditions. The Allies win by controlling building. We'll see that when we look at the map in just a moment, providing that the Japanese do not amass 6 casualty victory points. I've never talked about casualty victory points on Tabletop Talks before, so I think I mentioned it briefly. The simple version of it is that a half squad is worth 1 point, a full squad is worth 2 points, a leader is worth 1 point, and you get an additional one for each negative modifier. So a -1 leader would be worth 2 victory points. Now, sometimes the scenario designer will use that as kind of exit victory points. So you need to exit a certain number of points off a location, for example, and that's how you would calculate them. And if it's casualty victory points, then it's casualties. So if some of the Australians are killed or captured in the course of this scenario, then those will count as CVP, casualty victory points. We can see, obviously, the Japanese involved here. We can see that this is taking place in New Britain, in New Britain Island, which is in the Pacific. If we look at the special rules, there are very, very few special rules, but PTO is in effect, including light jungle. I'm going to explain the significance of that even as soon as we get onto the map. So this is the board. First thing is to point out that because PTO is in effect, roads don't exist, and because I'm on Vassal, I was able to make the roads vanish. I think bridges become fords, but if you're playing on boards, obviously you will not be able to make that transformation. You'll have to remember that the roads don't count. There are various other changes, quite significant changes to the map board. The first is, and actually this is just an ordinary SSR, nothing to do with PTO. There's an SSR to say that all stone buildings are wooden. In addition, moving on to the PTO rules, the first one I want to mention is wooden buildings with more than one building depiction in the hex, like P8. Actually, those are not wooden buildings, those are huts. Huts are a hindrance, so you can fire through them. They're a +1 hindrance, but they also have a +1 TEM as well. So they're kind of like sort of like a building's light, I suppose. However, this one, because there's only one building depiction in 08, that's a normal solid wooden building, same as in the European theatre. The next thing that's different is kunai. Now, kunai is different in that it costs 2 movement points. Kunai, if it was grain, it would be 1.5, wouldn't it? It's kunai, and it is 2 movement points to move through. It is still a +1 hindrance, so in that respect it is the same. Right, in this scenario, in all PTO scenarios, woods become jungle. Now, jungle comes in 2 flavours, light and dense. For this scenario, for simplicity's sake, it's only light jungle that's in effect. So these are essentially light jungle. Light jungle is, for most purposes, essential to woods. The most significant difference is that they're taller. They're not 1 level, they are 2 levels high. So an example might be, if we're in the European theatre of operation, if you wanted to fire this mortar from this hex on level 1, you could see over all of these woods and fire at a unit that just happened to be over here in BB8, assuming that range was appropriate, etc. But in the PTO, this woods that is in between is 2 levels high, so in fact that would be blocked in PTO. It wouldn't be blocked in the European theatre, so that's the main difference. Now, there are a lot more differences with dense jungle. I don't want to go into them particularly because they don't affect this scenario. The next one that's different is if you look at this hex here, we've got what would normally be an orchard. Orchard hexes represent palm trees. Palm trees are, for most purposes, exactly the same as orchards, so this one's quite easy. The only difference is that they are always in season. So orchards provide +1 hindrance, no TEM for any units there. I don't remember if I went through this kind of idea, but when I went with other tabletop talks, but a unit in J8, actually it doesn't really work, does it? Say a unit in J7 trying to fire at hexes down here can't see them because L7 is at a higher elevation, so it's firing down through the canopy. Because they're always in season, you can't see through the trees. So this hex here, that would be brush in the European theatre. It's not brush. Here it is bamboo. Well, bamboo is incredibly difficult to move through. It blocks line of sight, gives you +1 TEM. If this unit here in V7 wants to move into S9, it needs to use all of its movement. So it wouldn't be able to do it from V7. It wouldn't be able to do it even from U9. You might go, well, you could bypass here for 1. How many points is it to move into S9? But it's all of your points, so he wouldn't be allowed to do it. If he started here, if the movement phase, these 2 units were here, well, then they would be able to move in using all of their movement points, and they become CX, and they become pinned, meaning that they won't even be able to advance in the advanced phase. So it's quite a big investment of movement points, really. A number of ways in which PTO is different. One is that it is much harder to detect enemy units. The Japanese unit here might begin the game hip, and it's hidden, so it starts off board. In the European theatre, if these units move through these hexes, let's just imagine he moves into there. In the European theatre of operations, you immediately would reveal that hidden unit. Not so in PTO. In PTO, the Japanese player has the option of remaining concealed, and there's a few rules about it. We'll talk about those perhaps a little bit later on. So it is much harder to detect things. It's also much more difficult to find things that you've dropped, like sort of a machine gun left in the woods or whatever. Finding it is much more difficult. And the final one is to do with advances. So if you had a Japanese unit in this jungle here, and the Australians have really kind of come at it from all directions, and it's the advance phase, they're going to be able to move in with a pretty good advantage, you'd think. But there's always a +1 to the ambush die roll if you advanced into jungle. I believe it also applies with bamboo, and I believe it possibly also applies with kunai. So there's a whole series of extra rules, but I don't want to dwell too long on those, simply because I don't think that some of those will be particularly impactful in this particular scenario. But the advancing into sort of jungly terrain could well be. So that pretty much covers what I'm going to say about the terrain. Okay, so to talk just about this particular scenario, the Japanese are setting up Never Eat Shredded Wheat to the west of this red line here, which and the area north of the river is out of play. The Australians set up to the east of that line. Japanese setting up first. The Australians are attacking. The Australians need to capture that building by the end of the game and lose less than 6 CVP. I think we talked about that. So essentially, I suppose 3 squads. It's worth remembering that the leader is worth 3 points, and that's perhaps one of the reasons that this scenario has been designed with a rule which stops the sniper from killing the leader if he chooses him as a target to kill. I think because it would be such a swing of 3 CVP in favour of the Japanese. So the Australians got to capture this building without losing the equivalent of 3 squads. Okay, so let's just talk about some of the special features of the Japanese. Right, there are many. Okay, one of the first, I suppose the first, and in a way the most obvious and the most important, is that they don't break when they fail a morale check. So you see this first line Japanese squad here. If that was a German or Russian or British squad or whatever, it would break when it fails its morale. Instead, the Japanese stripe. It's a kind of a mini casualty reduction, I suppose. And this is what makes them truly remarkable. It means they're really, really stubborn in defensive positions because you can't get them out. They just stay there, they carry on firing, albeit with lower firepower. But also makes them absolutely terrifying when you're defending against them, because they keep coming, they just keep on charging. Okay, so let's unstripe that guy. So the first time they fail a morale check, it would stripe. The second time they go down to a half squad, and the third time then they would break. So the third time they fail a morale check, they break. It means that they keep on fighting when European, North American forces and Australian forces give up and start and break, but those forces from Europe can rally and come back at full strength. The Japanese instead are always taking a hit to their strength. Sometimes by the end of a scenario, you start out with a large force of good quality Japanese troops, and you end up with all sort of like 136s and all sorts of like funny things wandering around because they've just reduced so many times. So that's one key thing. The next is that their leaders act like commissars. Now, I don't think we've talked about commissars on tabletop talks. We might have done, but commissars essentially raise the morale of units that they are stacked with by 1. So if I decide that I'm going to put these two together, the leader there and the 448, effectively the 448 is a 449, which is a considerable benefit. I mean, the 9 morale is very high. Okay, so that's a benefit. And another effect is if that Japanese unit was broken, perhaps it had gone all the way down to a half squad and it was broken, and that leader was trying to rally him, not only is his morale 1 higher, but also DM doesn't apply if that leader is able to rally them. However, if they fail to rally them, then they suffer an ELR failure. So there is a potential cost. So that's another one of the features of the Japanese. Another feature is that they can hip 10% of their force factors squads rounded up. There are only 4. Actually, there's only 2.5. There's 2 squads in this scenario, but the Japanese can hip one of them. The medium machine gun has to be fired by a 228 by the crew. So they're crew-served weapons with the Japanese army. Ordinary squads are not qualified. They can fire them, but there's a penalty. So whenever you've got medium machine guns in the Japanese order of battle, you nearly always have the 228s as well. So that's interesting. The next thing is unlikely to be very important in this scenario. Like the Russians, the Japanese can perform a type of human wave attack. This type of human wave attack is called a banzai charge. Unlike the Russians, where you need to have at least 6 multi-man counters, I think, in the charge. The only requirement for a Japanese banzai charge is that there is a leader. So one leader could potentially lead a banzai charge on their own. Also, but obviously could also, as long as there are adjacent units in a line, they can all do that banzai charge together. So I'm not going to talk about banzai charges. They're essentially the same as human waves. They're unlikely to be a part of this particular scenario. Okay, so in this scenario we have 1 crew-served medium machine gun. We have got 2 squads, a mortar. The Japanese mortar is quite a remarkable piece of equipment, and we need to stop the Australians who are coming on from the right. We've got some concealment counters which we can use to hide our force, but we can also use one of them. We can also use them to create dummies. So to make the British Australians, I keep calling them British, I do apologise, to make the Australians unclear in exactly where the Japanese are hiding. The final thing that I wanted to talk about with the Japanese is just how remarkably good they can be in close combat. There's some very, very key differences with the Japanese. So if you imagine there's a Japanese unit in that jungle hex and that there are 2 Australian units waiting to advance into close combat against that Japanese unit. Now they outnumber them 2 to 1. In normal circumstances you would rate the Australian chances of winning in this situation quite highly. The Japanese do have a number of advantages. Actually, the Australians have something which I'll tell you about in a moment, which slightly counteracts it. But if they are going to advance into close combat here, and they are, the first thing is you've obviously got the ambush dice roll. The Japanese get a -1 because elite and first line Japanese units are always stealthy, so we're subtracting 1 from that dice roll. Because the Australians are moving into sort of jungly terrain, that's jungle, kunai and bamboo, they'd also be pinned if it's bamboo, they have to add 1 to their dice roll. So against most nations, advancing against Japanese in jungle, it's a very, very, very good chance that the Japanese are going to win the ambush. The Australians slightly undo that advantage because they're stealthy as well. All Australians and New Zealand forces that are not green are also stealthy. But here we've got the situation, the Japanese are going to be subtracting 1 from their dice roll in the ambush roll, and the Australians are going to be just a straight roll. For the sake of illustrating this, let us imagine that the Japanese win this ambush. If the Australians had won, this would just be, we would just resolve this normally. But and if there is no ambush at all, we would just resolve this normally. But if we imagine for a moment that the Japanese win this ambush, and they very often do in lots and lots of situations, they have to declare hand to hand, which is a much more deadly form of close combat. All of the to kill number is essentially a 2 higher. Now here they're going to try to attack these Australians at 1 to 2. Now the kill number for 1 to 2 is normally a 4. If it's hand to hand, that goes up to a 6. We've now got a 6 to kill number. In addition to that, the Japanese always get a -1 on their to kill dice rolls in close combat if they are in hand to hand combat. Well, they are. In addition to that, they've won the ambush, so that's another -1. So we have got an 8 as the to kill number as the Japanese make this attack. On a 7 or less, all of the Australian forces are wiped out. And what's significant about that, of course, is in that kind of ambush situation, of course, the Australians don't even get a chance to attack back. So as you can see, Japanese can be very, very powerful in close combat, both as the attacker and very, very much as the defender. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to put this sniper counter out of the way for now. That will get placed after the Allies have placed their forces. I'm going to get rid of the move counter so I can remember what I haven't moved. I'm going to place up some of these units. So this medium machine gun obviously has to go with the crew. So I know that that's going to form a unit. I don't know where it's going to go. I'm just simply sort of trying to team some of these guys up really. I quite like the idea of having of deploying. So I'm going to deploy. And I can't see how you do it. Here we go. There we go. So we're going to deploy that unit there, clone it. One of these units is going to have the mortar, and the other one is going to try to be a bit of a surprise somewhere. Now I'm actually going to put him in S9. Now I don't think this is necessarily optimum play, but the idea of putting him in there is that the Australians are very unlikely to, even for them to occur to them to try and search for it. If something breaks, Australians break over there, they're going to head towards this wood over here, and they are going to find there's some Japanese there. Might be able to get some interesting encircling shots. We might be able to get a shot at something moving that thinks that it's safe. So that unit there is going to be hip. Okay, the rest of the force we don't particularly want to lose, so we're going to have a little bit of a think about this. Interestingly, the mortar is able to fire at very, very short ranges. It's very heavy, a 4 pp, so we want it already, I think, already on the hill. That's why I've given it to the half squad, so we don't need to stop this guy from don't really want him hauling around anything too heavy. He's going to have to move. We're going to put this chap here. Is that dangerous? Well, you see, I think it's relatively safe, because if they start to look too dangerous in coming through this direction, we've got some firepower they weren't expecting us to have. So we're here. Now I'd rather he was here than in the woods. I want him to have, I suppose he could be in the woods. Do you know what? Let's put him in the woods. It looks like I've left a gap here, because he won't be able to fire. You could fire on this hex, but you could bypass here. It might be that the Australians will go for a sort of a fast little rush around the side, not realising that actually that it is covered. Medium machine gun. Now I did have the idea of putting it out here or something crazy like that. The British won't, so the Australians will not be expecting it, but it feels too dangerous. Okay, so instead I want to put it perhaps somewhere like in here, where it can protect this area. But do you know what? I might swap these two round. I quite like that. Okay, this guy can fall back through the buildings. The mortar can fall back quite easily through the up the hill. The mortar hasn't got brilliant lines of sight because it can't see in this sort of direction, but it can see out in this sort of direction. So it's actually got quite a good line of sight in that respect. This chap here is protected by the medium machine gun from any being rushed at the front, so the medium machine gun potentially could lay a fire lane in that direction, and I think we'll put this guy here, so it's right in the middle. Now what's going to have a leader with it. Okay, we're going to start with a leader here. It's going to keep that machine gun in action. Everything needs to be concealed, because everything needs to be concealed. But this might be a real unit. And the final act, I suppose, is that I could actually make this stack be hip. I don't see any reason for not doing that. And if they're going to be hip, they don't need to be concealed. So I think I can actually make a little stack here. Yeah, let's make it look like that's the leader with a squad, and we'll pop it there. Right, the reason I've made these hip is because it's equivalent to a half squad. I'm allowed to hit the equivalent of one squad. Okay, now let's have a look at the Australians. I guess this machine gun has got to go with one of the 458 squads. I'm going to deploy this half squad, this inter half squad. Sorry, apologise there. And one of them I'm going to give the mortar to, and the other one is going to be a little scout for me. Now notice I've deployed the 457s rather than the 458s. I want the 458s to use that good morale to kind of keep themselves unbroken, linked to the 9.2 leader, the medium machine gun, the light machine gun, etc. So this is my kind of most important kind of element. These guys are going to do a little bit of searching. These are going to be some sort of a fire group, particularly because the British mortar has smoke on 7. Makes this a very, very powerful weapon, potentially, in being able to help us to lay some smoke. Now, obviously, I know how the Japanese have set up, and you can see, because you can see that I've got my hips here, and you know that this stack here isn't real. But thinking about this as though we don't know that is what we're going to be doing. I just need to remind you a couple of things about the Australians, in case you don't know. Australians are stealthy unless they are green in ambush. They are like the British in that they do not cower. They have those kinds of benefits. I think that's all that's likely relevant here. So this half squad, I think we're going to get him to move through into the kunai and perform a search. Now, the only reason I really want to do this is because I want, we're going to go nice and steady, work our way through the Japanese, but also I want to show you how those mechanics work. I don't think we've done searching in any of the other tabletop talks. We can do it here, and it is slightly different in the jungle, in the PTO. Right, this mortar needs to be set up so that it can fire at likely targets. Now, it could fire at P3 and fire smoke onto there, and there's a reasonable chance of that hitting and there being smoke. Of course, the Australians at the moment do not know if that's a real unit or not. Could potentially fire at this one, which looks like a more menacing stack because there are 3 counters there instead of 2. So that might be quite tempting to do. But the main force is going through the forest here, through the woods. We're gonna have these guys down here, and we're gonna have these guys here. Okay, right. The idea is this is where the advance is going to go. These units are sort of, to some extent, supporting. We're going to feel out the enemy. We've got to find out where their hips are, if any. Find out which of these concealed counters out there. Where the mortar is, where the medium machine gun is. And the turn 1 is going to be quite gentle and quite slow. Okay, the sort of pre-game sequence then. I suppose the Japanese need to probably put their sniper down here somewhere. It's got to be within 6 hexes of 6 hexes occupied by Australians. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's not possible, so it has to be within 6 hexes of 5. So pretty much choose anywhere around here. It's going to go there. Open ground. Open ground is really a really good idea for placing your sniper because it makes it more likely that your sniper will absorb an enemy sniper. It just means that it's more vulnerable to being hit by a sniper. The Australian sniper, I guess, right in the heart of the position. We don't know where leaders are, who the people particularly want to kill. We don't know where they are, so we're gonna go for that. Okay, we then have a look at concealment, and in actual fact, this unit can be seen from here. All of these units, Japanese, have lines of sight to, albeit from concealed units, but this guy cannot be seen, so I can actually conceal him. And you can see it's not been, here we go, conceal, a little while since I've been playing with Vassal. So we're now ready to actually begin the game properly. Okay, so we can start to play properly. So it's turn 1. We have rolled for the weather. There is no change there. We have got no rally actions for the Australians nor for the Japanese. So we are going to go straight to the prep fire phase. I've already moved that forward because I was fiddling around a moment ago. So first thing we're going to do with smoke should always be fired first. So that's the first thing we have to do. We want to fire smoke from here. Now obviously we know that this is a dummy. Oh no, we don't, it's a real unit. Okay, well either way we're going to fire at that unit. And the reason that the Australians are selecting that unit, and they don't know if it's a dummy or not, is because there are no hindrances, that's the best chance of hitting. First thing to look at is the smoke depletion level, which is a 7. So we need to roll 7 or less. If we roll a 7, remember it's the last smoke round. But also what about the to hit? So it's a base 7 to hit. We are adding 2 to the dice roll because they're concealed, and we're subtracting 2 from the dice roll for smoke. So it's 7 is the to hit. We rolled a 4. Now, interestingly, that is a hit, so we get the smoke. Well, the interesting bit is the bit I was about to say. But we've got rate of fire, so we can actually carry on firing. So we're going to try and hit this spot with smoke as well. This time it'll be a 6 to hit. It's a hit and rate of fire. This is actually quite remarkable. Okay, now is it going to be worth trying to fire smoke at these? Well, the way we're rolling dice, probably worth firing at these guys as well. Remember, these being hit, the Australians don't really know they're there. That would be a very good target for smoke. Otherwise, we might as well go for it. Let's see how many hindrances there are going to be. It's going to go through 1, 2, 3, so it's +3, so it's like 4s to hit. So that's it, and we miss and no rate of fire. Now it's a very unique feature of mortars firing smoke, that when mortars fire smoke they can keep rate of fire. Most weapons don't. And although there's a very good chance that smoke would have been, like the first time we rolled it, we'd have rolled above a 7, or it would just have missed or whatever. Though there's a very good chance smoke won't work when you fire it from a mortar like this. There's also the occasional time that it's actually utterly amazing. It's kind of one of them, really. Now that gives us a great deal of protection as we move this guy around and perhaps these guys around as well. Now I want to do this carefully. I want the Australians to operate in a careful way. So we're now going to move to the movement phase. These guys are going to assault move into there for 2. This unit is deciding not to fire, and they are going to attempt to search, or they're going to make a search attempt. We've got 6 hexes around him and 1 in the middle. So, okay, so we roll a dice, and that number is the number of hexes that we cannot search. So what's unique about PTO is that we add 2 to that dice roll. Now there are other modifiers, CX if it was more than a half squad and stuff like that, but in this there are no other modifiers except for the PTO one, which is to add 2 to the dice roll. So we have rolled a 5, which goes to a 6, goes to a 7. which means that these guys can't do any, can't search anything. Okay, this guy's going to do the same. He's going to assault move into here, and he's going to attempt to search. He has a slightly better chance because he's a full squad. He subtracts 1. Still get the +2 for the PTO. So we're adding 1. 3 goes to a 4. So there are 4 hexes that we can't, which means there are 2 hexes that we can. It costs 1 to search a hex. Obviously, there's not going to be anything in these hexes because the Japanese can't set up there. Bamboo costs 2. So they're going to ask to reveal anything that's in this hex. And of course, they have a unit there. Okay, so that was the way that they were able to discover it. However, we now have to check the rules for search casualties, because whenever you if you find mines while searching, or if you find a unbroken unit, then there is a possibility of search casualties. So when you're searching, you discover a unit. The defending player, if you like, gets to roll 1 dice. On a 1 or less, the unit that was searching suffers from casualty reduction. There are a number of things that modify that roll. One of them is half squads in addition to or above the like 1 half squad, and it doesn't apply here. But also -1 per stealthy unit. Remember, all Japanese first line elite units are stealthy, so in fact on a 1 or a 2 this dice roll will cause casualty reduction. It doesn't. Okay, so that's very, very significant. Now, however, they can now fire, but I think they're probably going to be waiting to see what happens with these guys. Okay, so these guys now are going to assault move into here for 2, and these guys are going to assault move into here for 2. He's going to take a shot. 4 up 1. 6 or 7 on a 4. It's a pin toss check. 6 times they pass it. There are 2 residual there, and he is first fired. Now, an interesting thing. Where are we going to get these guys to? I think the place for this to go is over here. So 1, 2, 4. We know he can't fire at him because he's got a nearer enemy unit, and it means that he's not in any danger, and he's going to be able to throw back a reasonable shot at the half squad in just a moment. And that has got to be the end of the Allied movement phase. Okay, so now it's the defenders' defensive fire. Okay, we can fire this. Okay, so I think we're going to go for it. Let's get the medium machine gun into action. So it's essentially like a final fire, isn't it? So he's going to fire at this squad here, and this is going to be a 4 + 1. Okay, 6, 7, 8, 9, no effect. Okay, that's it. These units are not going to fire. These guys here could fire. We could try firing at him. It doesn't seem like a terrible idea. We could even fire at the other mortar, but that seems to be somewhat of a long way away. Let's keep it concealed for the moment. I think it's quite nice keeping the Allies guessing. So that was the defensive fire phase, and that's advancing fire. Okay, well, these guys, they can fire into here, these guys can fire into here, and these guys. So what I think we should do is remove all defensive fire and remove all residual. And then what I think we should do is fire these 2 units together. Now they're halved and doubled. We've got 4, 8, 10. Don't use the machine gun. 8 + 1 into there. 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 on an 8 is obviously a normal morale check, and they of course pass it no problem. Now this unit here is going to fire. Right, they're going to be halved, but they got the benefit of the leader. So this is actually, take the concealment off. This is actually a 2 - 1. That's quite a good roll, isn't it? So we've rolled a 2. Effectively, on a 2, which is a K1. That's enough for this Japanese unit to be destroyed. Route phase, obviously there's no routes, and now we've got advances. So this guy does actually have a acquisition here. If you remember, he missed when he fired there. Right, but I could advance him. I'd lose that, but it would move me nearer to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I don't see any strong advantage to moving him. But these guys, there is a reason to move. So let's move these guys forward here. We've got this is inherent, so I can't actually see down that hex spine, but I can see this hex. So that's good. He's going to advance to here. He's going to advance to here. And that is the end of the advance phase. Close combat phase, there obviously isn't any close combat. There's no concealment growth. Everything is sort of in sight of some Japanese unit. And therefore, it is now Japanese turn 1. Turn 1. So the first thing I wanted to say is obviously this has been over a year since I recorded the first part of this. All kinds of things have been going on in my life. If you listen to Illuminating Round, you might have an idea what some of those are, so I apologise for that. For the sake of continuity, I have worn the same shirt, so if I hadn't mentioned it, you probably would never even noticed. So this is the beginning of Japanese turn 1. Having a little bit of a look here, we've got a long way to fall back. The Australians got a long way to go to capture this this building, so it's perhaps in order to try to withdraw somewhat. We've got a nice stone building here. We've got these hills. They might be good places to make a stand. Also, we obviously need to move from these positions. They're not good firing positions. That smoke will remain there for quite some time. First thing we're going to do is roll for wind. There is no change. There are no rally actions for the Japanese. There are no rally actions for the Australians. There is no prep fire because the Japanese are going to move, and moving is nearly always going to be a good idea on the defence, isn't it? Because you're going to kind of keep in concealment, not giving the your enemy a chance to fire at you. That if we take pins off, TIs will disappear. So we're going to go straight to the movement phase. There's no prep fire. Okay, so movement, just a question of how we extricate ourselves to the next line of defence. So how about these guys in here? So they're going to stay where they are because that might actually be a little bit of a surprise to the Australians as they start to approach that position. I think what we're going to do is we want this to look real. These are dummies, if you remember, so they're going to assault move first. They're going to assault move to here, and that's going to cost 2 movement points. These guys here are not going to assault move, but the Australians can't see them, so they don't lose concealment. They're going to go 1 to there, 2, 3, 4 to there. Now these guys, of course, we want them to gain concealment, so as long as we get them away from this hedge, the Australians won't be able to see them, and they'll gain concealment. I think we're going to just go for. Is there a gap in that? No, so we'll go for 2 to there. Do you know what? Better way, bypass it for 1. 2, 3 to there. I'm a little bit conscious that we need to prevent the Australians from running around here, but we should be able to protect that. Okay, so that's the Japanese move. Nice and easy, nice and quick. There'll be no real defensive fire. The only possible case for making defensive fire, well, there's 2 possible cases for the Australians making defensive fire. One is to put residuals somewhere if they think that the Japanese might move back into these positions, and the other is to fire at hexes where you think there could be hidden units. So let's have a go at that. Let's imagine there might be a hidden unit there. So this guy here is going to fire at that, and obviously if there is anything there, it's concealed, so we halve our strength. So this will be a 2, +1 for the hedge, -2 for the leader, so it's a 2 - 1. So this is a recon by fire, isn't it? We're finding out if there's something there by firing at it. We need to get a result. -1 6 on a 2 is a pin task check. So if there were anything in there, you would have to take that pin task check and would of course be revealed. Of course, the Japanese now are going to declare that there is nothing in that hex. Okay. This mortar's going to fire into here, area target type to hit, and that's obviously no effect, but it does put that on there, and that will perhaps dissuade the Japanese from moving in. So that's the end of defensive fire. Not very much, but the Allies did find something out, and they've made one hex a little bit less appealing for the Japanese. Advancing fire, the Japanese can't see anything, so there's no advancing fire. Move to the route phase, there's no routes. Advances, well, the Japanese are going to advance. Now actually this, here in N6, that's not a terrible position, because if the British try to come through this sort of walled area, there's open ground here, and they can potentially fire at it. They got good opportunities to kind of route back to to escape later on onto the hill. They're obviously staying where they are. I'm inclined to leave him where he is, and the logic of that is that he can protect 09 here, make sure that the Australians don't sneakily go around. Now, how about we do this? Now he knows that there's... Okay, so what we'll do is we will advance back into here. Now that might seem pointless, but well, the Australians might think that they're real units, and they might make them more cautious this turn than they might otherwise be, and that is move to the close combat phase. There's no close combat, and we now have concealment growth, which will be here. And that brings us, get rid of the move counters there, that will bring us to the beginning of turn 2 Australian. Okay, first thing they do is roll for wind. 11 is no change, close but no change. No rally actions for either side. Australians first, no rally actions. Then it is the prep fire phase, and the first thing is that smoke is reduced. Your smoke is reduced in your prep fire phase. And so that smoke is all of a sudden immediately a little bit less effective. Further prep fire. So we've got, if we're firing smoke, we have to do it first thing. So he's going to fire smoke into here. I can't remember how many. I think it's 3. Actually, that's the wrong hex. Sorry. It is 1, 2, 3. It is 3. So the to hit. Yeah, I've got about 3 to it. To hit, I've rolled 6, 7, 8, 9. I've still got smoke, but that misses. That flips to a 2. And of course, what the Australians are trying to do there is shroud that in smoke and make sure that it doesn't present any real danger. There's no more prep fire. So we're moving to the Australian movement phase. And this half squad is there for scouting. And scouting it will do. So it's going to go 2 to there. Now actually we could fire at that from the hidden mortar. Let's go for it. Why not? Okay, so unhit those. Okay, so it's 7 base to hit, -1 for not assault moving, so 8s would hit to hit. It hits. We've got 2 firepower, so it's going to be on the 2 table, 2 flat. Double 1 on the 2 is a K1. Okay, so that's another casualty. Okay, so these guys are going to have to be a lot more careful. We now know, the Australians now know where all of the Japanese counters are. There's a little bit of high TEM terrain. I think we want to be advancing into that. I guess we're going to go 1, 2. 3, 4, 6 to there. So they're going to fire. I don't think, yeah, we didn't keep rate of fire with the mortar, so we should put some sort of a counter on it. So we could fire at that. So we got the medium machine gun, which would be a 4+1, a non-assault move. It would be a 4 flat. It's not the worst shot in the world, is it? Okay, so the Japanese go for that 4 flat. The +1 for the huts. 5, 6. 6 on a 4 is a normal morale check. So we've got the leader who passes it, and then the squad 6, 7, 8. They are 8. So they're absolutely fine. He's got the -2 leader there. There will be there would be 2 residuals. It goes down 1 because of the huts. Okay, these guys. Assault move. 1, 2. 3. Okay, and that's the end of the Australian moves. I didn't keep rate of fire. Okay, so defensive fire, Japanese have no shots. Advancing fire, I think these guys do. So at this point we can take off the residual counters, and in fact, as we've passed defensive fire, we can take the defensive fire counters off too. We have got some advancing fire shots, so this guy here can certainly see these guys. We've got 4 firepower. It's half because they're concealed. It's half for the advancing fire phase. It's going to be a 1 -2. 4, 5 rolled a 5 on a 1, which is a pin task check, and the Australians get to find out that all of these are dummies. Okay, that's the end of the advancing fire phase. Routes, there are none. Advances. Okay, so they're going to advance into here. Now the idea is that we've got 2 squads there. We don't want them adjacent. You know, a 4+1's bad enough. Take this off. Let's take all these things off. We'll move him there, and he's going to go into there. Now he may get fired at in the Japanese prep fire phase, but if he does, it's only 1 squad, and we get a good shot coming back. We get rid of these guys. Well, I think they're going to move 2. They're going to assault move to there. They lose 1 point. That's fine. Okay. I think the time is rapidly approaching where this half squad has to drop that mortar and just run. So we can flip this over. There is now Axis. Japanese turn 2. We're going to roll the dice for wind. Nothing. Still no rally actions. Go straight to prep fire. Now, so the Japanese mortar here is considering firing. By the way, this has come off because the mortar moved. You can almost certainly see these guys. Now the thing is that if it can, these guys are very, very vulnerable to the mortar because they're in the protection of the woods, but of course the mortars make it less. So I think we're going to risk a shot from there. So first thing I do is check line of sight, and it just clips that building. I can zoom in and just see that it just clips that building. So the Japanese have to roll anyway on the to hit because they declared the shot and gain nothing really from it. That probably, right, so realistically the Japanese have to move. Now they could fire at this guy, but then they'll get an 8 up, an 8 flat back, which is, it's this is a fairly large proportion of their force in there. So I think the default here, the best idea is probably to escape. Now the one thing is we know that this hex N7 is blocked from the guys from there, so it'd actually be quite safe from these guys to move up onto the hill. We know it would be safe from them because we got all sorts of obstacles in the way. Well, we got this building in the way. What it's not safe from is the mortar. The mortar can see this hex, but if it hits, it's only a 2, and we have the effect of the commissar effect of this leader, and the shot has got to go through this smoke. So this feels like a relatively safe move, safer perhaps than moving to N8, where clearly he is going to get a couple of shots. So they're going to assault move up to here. We're in the movement phase now, obviously. Okay, that's going to cost 2 points. I think the British would be rude not to take a shot with the mortar. It's going to be +1, +2, +3 for the smoke. So it's going to be +3 to hit. And it misses completely. They do get to put this on there. Okay, what about this squad here? Again, I think the trick is this sort of slow withdrawal is the way forward, but we also don't want the Australians running around this way. We want them coming the slow way through the woods. So this unit can continue to guard that kind of flank, I guess. We could move 2 up to there. He can't fire. He won't be able to see him. 2 up to there. If they see X, they can get up to here. They could advance. No, we're just assault move up to there that costs 2 movement points. Right, the Australian final fire. The Australians know they can't take a shot there. They know they can't take a shot there. This has already failed. We expended all of our opportunities to fire that mortar. So we can go straight on to advancing fire phase. Okay, so there's no advancing fire from the Japanese. Route phase, there's no routes. We hit the advance phase. And then I think it is a little bit tricky thinking about what best to do. The mortar feels like a good rear guard unit, the unit that can be kind of to some extent sacrificeable. Unless we get something down in this sort of low ground area, the Australians are going to be able to run around like this. They're not going to be able to enter K10. They could potentially make a lot of progress towards I8. But I'm not very keen, as the Japanese, to move a unit down there, which will then probably get lost. So actually, do you know what we're going to do? I think we're going to move our least valuable unit down. So that's effectively trying to block progress by the Australians this turn. About this guy. Quite like the idea of having him up here. Now that will CX him moving up there because it uses up all of the 4 movement points available in the advance phase. But I think that's a good position for him because he can influence both sides of this hill depending on which way the Australians go. In a close combat phase, of course, there isn't. He doesn't gain concealment. He probably does. This can't see him. This certainly can't see him. And I'm prepared to give that a line of sight check to find out. Oh, of course not. It's going through the orchards, through the different levels. So of course that unit gains concealment. Okay, and that is the end of turn 2. So we're now moving to turn 3. Australians roll for wind. There's none. There are no rally actions for either side yet. Let me get rid of some defensive fire and prep fire counters. Let's go to prep fire. First thing is the smoke vanishes. Always reduces, but goes from 2 to nothing. Prep fire. Okay, do they want to fire this? It is not a mad idea because having smoke up on this hill might be very, very useful because you might be able to get units onto the hill. You could perhaps go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 plus 5 movement points. But But I think that feels dangerous. I think the key thing here is to destroy this unit. That's what we're going to try and do. So he is going to drop the mortar and is going to run. So no prep fire. First thing that's going to happen is this guy is going to assault move to here. Now the Japanese do have some fire options. Obviously you could fire this half squad. It would be a 4 flat, not terrible shot by any means, but these are very high morale troops, so it might not be effective. They could fire the mortar with the hope of keeping sort of rate of fire. If I just look on the back, it's a very unique mortar. You can see it, you've got illuminating rounds on there, IR. Great name for a show. You've got a smoke number there, but only from between 3 and 10 hexes, so I can't fire that smoke at this unit. There's also WP late in the war. I'm not quite sure when in the war this is, so, but potentially there's WP. But the rate of fire is only 1 if it fires HE at ranges less than 3. And this is, of course, if I fire this, its range is less than 3. So it might be worth hanging on, holding fire, because that mortar hasn't fired, and it's going to make other units perhaps a little bit more nervous in the way that they move. Okay, so next unit. Right, so they're safe. They're safe in this hex. Oops, let's just undo that. Okay, I think if I undo that, they're safe in here. The mortar can't see them. This can't see them because of the plateau effect of the hill. So let's send one to there. I don't think the Japanese can see that. 3 to there. Right, they can see that. They can only see it from the mortar. They could fire from the mortar. The mortar is unlikely to have a big impact on them, so not going to fire. Next guy. It's going to assault move to here. And then the leader will take him that same route. 1, 3. He's dropping the mortar. He's going to double time. Declares double time. Goes 1 to there. 3, 4, 6 to there. Nothing can fire at that movement. Okay. Final fire. Okay, so let's have a look. I think the only shot really we have is from the mortar. So the mortar has got to decide whether he wants to use his inherent or he wants to fire the mortar. I think he's going to fire the mortar because there is the possibility of rate of fire, and he is going to fire at, I guess that one first would make sense, to hit, misses and loses rate of fire. Okay. That's it for the Japanese. Next phase is the advancing fire phase. So let's take off the defensive fire counters, put some advancing fire counters down. Now we've got a potentially big attack here. I'm going to get rid of that information. A bit of a dilemma. Do we make this a separate shot for -2? I think we do. So I think we'll just fire these 2 units first. So this one is 4. This one is 6. That 6 halved. So let's not use the machine gun. So it's 4 from there, 2 from there. It's a 6 plus 1 because we got the hindrance of the palm trees. So it's a 6 plus 1. Rolled a 6, so a 7. 7 on a 6 is a normal morale check. Now this is key because if you look, obviously this is a Japanese half squad. If this breaks, it actually breaks. It won't casualty reduce or stripe. 9, it's broken. So there we go. We have a broken Japanese unit. Now that's exactly what the Australian plan was here, was to try and take another kind of unit out of the fight. But, like we were saying earlier, this unit may be broken, but it can potentially come back into the fight because at least it's going to run away. If the Japanese can stack it with the leader, then the DM doesn't count and his morale is 1 higher. If he's in the woods, he rallies on a 9 or less. That's really quite a good possibility of bringing that back. So for that reason, we're going to fire this edited as well. Now these guys are halved and doubled, so this is going to be a 4, but it's -2 because the leader 4 -2. Roll a 4, it's the Japanese sniper, down 2, so that will actually kill them. It's K2, so that was worth taking that shot, because at least that half squad now is out of the game and isn't going to come back somehow later on. Sniper activation, no effect. Remove all prep fires. So we need to move this on then. So advanced phase goes to route phase. There's no routes. We go to the advance phase. Okay. So this obviously comes off. It's nobody even manning that gun. Now, interesting. Without this unit, I think there's a lot of places where the Australians can go without actually losing. And still have a chance of gaining concealment. So we'll take him to there, because the plan is he's going to go around the let's call it the north of the map. I think stepping up onto N7 is dangerous. So let's go like that. Like that, and that's it. So all of these units gain concealment, like that, like that, and like that. And the reason I gain concealment is that the Japanese unit, the only unit that could conceivably see them really is, well, actually both of these units can't see down through the canopy of these palm trees. Now this guy over here can roll for it. The Japanese can't see him, but he is in open ground. So we have to roll 1 dice, and we have rolled a 4, to which we have to add the number of soldiers in the picture on the counter, which takes it to a 6, and then another one for CX7. So he doesn't gain concealment. And that's the end of the Allied turn 3. Okay, so Japanese turn 3. Okay. Wind, no effect. Get rid of those move counters. Okay, Japanese are now very, very much weaker, and I think they definitely need to be withdrawing. Although they're perfectly safe where they are in a sense. They could stay where they are. The Australians can't see them, but I think they need to be getting themselves into sort of better positions. So, no prep fire, no routes. No prep fire. Movement. So we're just simply going to assault move back to here. He's already on level 2, so he can assault move to here, at which point the CX comes off. I've got to be thinking really about where I want them to end up, and I think probably I don't really want these guys to be able to assault move and keep concealment, so I'm tempted to take them up into this wood, into this jungle. But that's for the advanced phase. So there is no defensive fire because we can't see the Japanese. The Australians can't see the Japanese. There is no advancing fire phase, basically for the same reason. There are no routes. Let's get rid of the movement counters. Advances. Okay, now normally moving from level 1 to level 2, so going up a level into jungle and ordinary woods, would cost you 4 movement points, and that advance would CX you. But actually you can see we've got a path here through the jungle, so it's only actually costing us 2 to move up, so that makes that look to me like a very, very good place to go. We can defend L7, we can defend L8, and it's actually quite costly in terms of movement factors for the Australians to get there. This is the nearest unit. 1, 2, to go up there would cost 6. So he could just about do it CX, but would then be, don't really want to be CX in jungle against the Japanese, so he wouldn't be able to advance in he wouldn't be able to advance into the close combat anyway, because if he's CX he wouldn't be able to advance. So that's the furthest they could get, and we can fire at it. He can't really realistically move through this hex. So this seems like a pretty effective defence. The only concern is that this unit might try to be very cheeky and run round, but he's CX, he's got to get over a wall. It's costing 2 movement factors every one of these that he moves through, so he's not going to get very far, is he? So 1, 2, 3, that's it. It's as far as he can go. I mean, he could bypass this building, 1, 2, 3, if he could get to there, and maybe advance up to there, but that half squad is not zipping around treacherously fast. So this feels like a reasonably good position for the Japanese to be in at the end of their turn. Already concealed, so we can move on to the Australian turn 4. Let's roll for wind. Nothing, still no rally actions. Let's move to the prep fire phase. Obviously there's no prep fire in this situation. Move on to the movement phase. And I've already talked about this, so I'm going to do this. I think this makes sense. Over the wall and in bypass for 1. 2. So it's 1, 2. And then up here for another 2 for 4. So it's 1 over the wall, the second movement factor for the bypass, and then 2 movement points to move up to there. Now he can definitely see him here, but actually he can probably see him at that vertex. So let's declare the shot there. I guess I should do a line of sight. I'm pretty confident that it can see that. Yeah, and he's in open ground. Okay, so here we go. First fire. 4 minus 2. Right, so it cowers, so it's only on a 2, but it's a 2 on a 2 is a K1. That unit has gone. Let's flip that. Okay, so, and I think there'd be 1 residual just here. Now actually, the Australians are kind of gradually building up the number of casualty victory points, you know, coming towards that CVP cap. So I think they do need to be careful. I think the rest of the force wants to keep concealment and advance up onto this hill completely concealed. He can't fire again. Now this might be a weak point in the Japanese position now. So these guys are going to go 1, 2 to there. 3 to there. And you can see these can't fire, but they're going to get a good advancing fire shot against them. 2 minus 1. Can they make it better? And we could get everybody up there. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's very tempting, isn't it? Problem is, if we don't, but we're not going to break them, we're going to stripe them. Okay, but I think we need something to go down the bottom as well. So this guy is going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're going to get like a 4 minus 1 against this unit here. And this guy is just going to try and get up onto the hill. So let's go for 1, 2 to there. Okay, so that's the Australian move. There's no defensive fire. This guy can't see down through the trees. They've expended all of their fire options. Advancing fire, well, we know what we're going to do. We're going to take a shot from there. Let's get rid of this. Actually, get rid of that as well. So this is going to be 4 minus 1, plus 1 for the wood, minus 2 for the leader. And we have rolled a final 8, which isn't brilliant. So that'll have no effect. I'm really, really hoping to stripe them so I could demonstrate that part of the rule, but there we go. We play it the way it happens. I think the Australians are possibly in a little bit of trouble now. I think if they'd done some damage there, they wouldn't have been too bad. Okay, so that's the end of the advancing fire phase. It is now routes. There are no routes, so we're going to go to advances. Right. Moving up here, and we potentially face an 8 flat. You know what? These are elite troops. That's what they're there for. I'm going to send him up here. Now that will CX him, but we're trying to put pressure on the Japanese to force them back. I'll just change that, this one, because I want the 8 morale guys there. So hopefully these will be forced to move back because they don't want to take the 8-1. But I think we're about to see just how tanky Japanese can be. Okay, so that's the end there. And we can go to the close combat phase. There's no close combat. There's no concealment growth. So we're going to go to the rally phase for the Japanese. They're going to roll the wind first. No change. No rally actions for either side. Prep fire. Okay. Well, this guy is going to fire. Okay. So he fires into the adjacent guys for 8+1. A bad roll for the Japanese. Okay. This guy knows that there's going to be a light machine gun in there, so he's going to be getting a, if he fires, he's going to be getting a 12 up one back. Almost certainly makes sense to say that's it for prep fire, movement phase, assault move backwards. You can't see down these paths, which means they're very good to kind of move down and to sort of like skulk away from the enemy. Sometimes roads, you get lines of sight down them, but not with these jungle paths. So that's the movement phase. Okay, so defensive fire. So, first shot is from there. So he is going to be firing back at 8+2, one for the wood, one for the jungle, one for the CX. 8, 9, 10. No effect. This is going to be an a 4-1. 5 goes down to a 4. 4 on a 4 is a 1 morale check. And right, they failed it, and 1 morale check, they effectively rolled a 12. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I need to very quickly check, but I'm pretty sure that that's their ELR. Yep, so the Japanese ELR, because it's such a bad fail, so they go down to a lower quality, and I can't even see the heat of battle. Here we go. I'm sure they've changed the order of that. Okay, so it's gone down to a first line. It's not such a good squad, but also it's going to stripe, and you can see it's become a 3-4-7. It was like a 4-4-8, wasn't it, or something like that. So it's quite a significant drop in quality, partly from striping and partly from the ELR failure, of course. That's the end of the advancing fire phase. Routes. So normally at this point a unit would be routing. They're Japanese. They don't. They just strike. Japanese can route, but they have to deploy into half squads and things like that. So, no routes. Advances. Okay, so the Japanese definitely want to advance now. There's still quite a bit of time. The Australians still have 2 turns. So I think they need to kind of hold them a little bit longer. Really, because these guys are concealed, the Japanese would like to be one sort of hex further away, so that they've got to non-assault move in order to get close to these guys, but would lose their concealment. I think we're just going to do this. That's it. That's the Japanese turn. Advance. Close combat phase, there isn't any, but the Japanese will. gain concealment. Okay. So last term but one for the Australians. Nothing on the wind. Prep fire. I can't see anything, so there's no prep fire. Into movement. Okay, so I guess it's messy, isn't it? It's a messy situation. Right, well, assault move into here. This CX comes off, and we are going to assault move into here. This guy's going to take a shot, so we've got first fire. 6 plus 1, 5, 6, 7 on a 6 is a normal morale check. 5, 6, 7, which will pin them. Got 2 residual in there. Okay. So what's this important stack here going to do? I mean, we can do a lot of do you know what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They can get all the way to there. Japanese can't even fire at them, and that's without CXing. They could potentially advance into here. Would CX them, but they could. I think we should do that. Okay, shows some of the. Okay, sorry, he's not CX. He's not declaring CX. So okay, they've got the leader there. So we're going to go 1, 2, bypass 3, 4, 5. He can't fire at that. Okay. That's the end of the movement phase. Defensive fire phase. Well, these guys can fire again, so let's flip them to that. They can only fire adjacent. It's a 2 plus 1. 3, 4 on a 2. There's a 1 morale check. So the Australians failing. Of course, 10. Did I say it was a 1 morale check? 11. No, they got very high morale, haven't they? So they're fine. They just break. But here you see that weakness. Okay, they're broken. They're no use to anybody now. This late in the scenario, it may very well be that they're not going to be any use to anybody. And let's get rid of residual. Right, and might as well get rid of that pin as well. Okay. Is the machine gun going to fire? Do you know what? They've got most of the advantages. This unit here, to advance into close combat, has got to CX. And they'll be advancing into jungle. That's going to make the ambush much more likely to go the Japanese way. So yeah, Japanese are not taking any shots there. Okay. That was defensive fire, advancing fire. Okay, so this is quite important, I think, for the Australians. So taking a shot from there, obviously to there, it's going to be a 2 minus 1. Not good enough. Okay. Is it worth taking a shot from here? 6 up 1. It wouldn't be 6, would it? Because they're halved. It would be a 2 up 1. Probably not. Okay, I think the Australians are starting to struggle a little bit. I'm not sure why I did that, sorry. So next phase is routes. Let's get rid of the prep fire and the defensive fire counters. This guy's simply going to go to there. He can't really go, yeah, he pretty much has to go there. Advances. Right, this game is not going to get 1 unless we push. So he's going to go into there and CX. These guys are going to go into here, CX, and obviously close combat. Next phase, close combat phase. Okay, so the first thing is the ambush. Right, so both are stealthy, so I'm going to cancel that out. I'm just not going to count it. Both have got -2 for being concealed, so they cancels each other out. So I think there are no other modifiers for the Japanese. For the Australians, there is a +1 for CX, a +1 for advancing into jungle. So this is the roll for the Australians. They've rolled an 8. The Japanese have rolled a 3. So they got an ambush. Now they could withdraw, but I think we want to see exactly what happens when the Japanese ambush Western forces. The Japanese here have got 3 points. The Australians 4. So they are attacking at 1 to 2. Has to be hand to hand, which means the to kill number is a 6. -1 because of the ambush, minus another one because of the CX, and minus another one because of the close combat hand-to-hand modifier that the Japanese get. So we need a 6. The Japanese are rolling -3. Okay, 5, 6, 7, 8. Right, so remarkably, the Australians survive. They're attacking back at 1 to 1. Obviously, the Japanese will be stacked together, so it's a 1 to 1 attack. A 1 to 1 is that the Australians need a 7, but they have to add 1 to their dice because they're CX, and they have to add another 1 to their dice because they were ambushed. So I think they need like 5s or something like that too. So that's not good enough. So this flips to melee. It's actually hand-to-hand melee. That's very, very much in undecided how this is going to go. Right, so go to the Axis turn. Next phase, 3, no change to the weather. Get rid of all of that. Rally actions. Okay, no real rally actions, but the DM comes off that unit there. Prep fire. The Japanese need to end up in that building, but they can advance into that building. So we could prep fire from there. If we prep fire from there, it's a 6+1, potentially wins the game. Because the Australians are in terrible trouble if we break this group here. Having said that, if we don't break them and they fire back at us, there's a danger that, of course, they'll have an effect. But they are CX. So they can be an 8 flat. And all that will happen is it will become a half squad. I think we need to take this shot. There we go. 6+1. No effect. Okay. There's no movement for the Japanese. Defensive fire. Okay. Obviously, take a shot from here. It's going to be an 8+2. It's an 8 flat. +1 for the 6, +1 for the jungle, -2 for the leader. 8 flat. Rolled an 8. 8 on an 8 is a normal morale check. 6, they pass it. Okay. So take off the prep fire counters, the defensive fire counters. Don't think anything moved. Advancing fire. Okay, well, there's obviously no advancing fire. Routes. There's no routes. Advances. Okay, this is the only thing that the Japanese can do. If they don't do that, the Australians are going to capture that building, aren't they? And that'll be it. They'll most likely win. Although there'll be a little bit of time that the Japanese potentially could. Oh no, because this is the last Japanese turn. Okay, so let's go to the close combat phase. Okay, so it's now the Australian turn. There's still CX, unfortunately. Of course, everybody is unconcealed from the last round of combat. So the Australians are going to attack. They're no longer ambushed, so they need. So it's a 1-to-1, isn't it? Which is a 7 to kill, adding 1 to their dice roll. Close combat, that kills all of the Japanese. The Japanese attacking back at 1 to 2 need a 6. but they can subtract 2 from their dice roll. Everybody in that hex is killed. I'll take the Japanese out first, okay, then this squad, because we now have 1, 2, 3, 4. What am I doing here? 4 points. Is it 5 points? I'm not quite sure why the 8-0 is there, because it was a year and a half ago. I'd have to go back and have a look at it. I can't remember if he was just not put on by mistake or whether he was killed. It's either 4 or 5 points of CVP at the moment. So if it becomes relevant, I might need to check. One more point and the Japanese will win. But you get a sense, if you haven't played PTO before, you get a sense of just how deadly that hand-to-hand close combat can be. Okay, so let's move on to the final turn, Allied turn 5. Okay, turn 6, I beg your pardon. Wind. No change. Rally actions. This guy's obviously going to try and rally. He does, and I think that's actually that's potentially very impactful for the final turn. Prep fire. I think you'd have to be an idiot to do anything other than this. They have to end up at the end of this turn in that building, fully in control of it. So I think adjacent is the only place to be. The only possible case for moving is if there was somewhere safer, so there was a stone building here or something that they could take cover in and advance safely into, but it's all jungle. So this is an 8 firepower attack, +2, +3 because I'm CX, -2 for the leader, so this is an 8 +1. 10 is no effect. Prep fire over, movement phase. I think really what we want to do is we want the Japanese to fire at this unit, because we don't really want the Japanese firing at this unit. We want, when prep fired, his CX came off. This is the dangerous close combat group, isn't it? Okay, so 1, 2, throw caution to the wind, 3 to there. Okay. So does he fire now at this more vulnerable unit? Or does he hold his fire for this more dangerous unit? I think he's going to take the shot, because non-assault movement, this is a much better shot than there where you've got the 9-2 leader, the very high morale troops. And it doesn't matter if troops are high or low morale, once they're in close combat it's pretty much the same thing. So these are probably, these are the most vulnerable, these are the ones I think that the Japanese should go for. So this is going to be a 6 flat, +1 for the jungle, -1 for non-assault movement. 9, I think that's no effect, isn't it? So that's that. They could also do another 2. Do you know what? Why not? 2 flat as well, because they spent. Oh no, you only spent 1 point in there. Can't do that. Okay. Well, I don't know what I've done here. So let's straighten that up again. I think there was some quite significant rolls there for the Japanese. Okay, final fire. Okay, so he can fire a 2-up-1 into there, or a 2-up-1 into there. Actually, it's a 1, isn't it? It's a 1-up. No, it's half and double, so it's a 2-up-1 into either location. All right, we'll try into here. 2-up-1. 6. No effect. Okay, advancing fire could be all over pretty much right now. I don't know why he didn't pick the light machine gun up. That would have been good. He had a spare point as well. Never mind, he forgot. And that's ASL. This is advancing fire. 4-up-2. Doesn't cower. 6, 7, 8. on a 4 is no effect. That would have been a pin task check if they'd thought to pick the light machine gun up. Could have thrown the odds further into the Australian way. Never mind. Getting rid of the prep fire, getting rid of defensive fire. No rats. Advances. Okay, so I think we all know what's going on here. In, close combat, and the end of the game is basically on the next few dice rolls. So it's not enough for the Australians to casualty reduce this Japanese unit. They've got to kill it in order to win. The Japanese, on the other hand, simply need to be in existence at the end of the close combat phase. If they're not killed, they win. They don't have to kill anything. So I think if everybody's killed, I guess the building would still be in Japanese control. The Japanese would have won the scenario, except actually they would have won the scenario because the Australians would be well over their CVP cap. Okay, ambush. We've got a -2 for the leader, a -1 for being stealthy, so the Australians have rolled a -1. Japanese are stealthy, -1. They rolled a 2. Usually Australians, I'm sorry, have just succeeded in ambushing them. This is going to be 2-1, but it's not hand-to-hand. 2-1 means the Australians need a 7, -1 for ambush, another 2 for leader, so it's a 7 -3. Close combat, that's enough to do it. That's a win for the Australians. Thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed it. Me and David have a little think about it, but I'm sure that there'll be videos to follow. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.